The domestic spying programs of the government are pretty well known by now: wiretapping, intercepting phone calls, data tracking. But there's some other spying operations that are happening and you probably aren't aware of. I have Kevin Gosztola with me now to explain what's happening. Kevin, DEA's got quite a scam going. It's amazing when you can simply take property away from individuals without ever there being a crime. You did a great job covering this. I just really liked your approach to it. Lay the story out for us a little bit.
Well, I think that given all the scandal around the National Security Agency, with all the disclosures from contractor Edward Snowden, that there had been a lot of focus on spying, and I think rightfully so. But what's interesting about this disclosure about the license plate readers that the DEA is using is that there's a purpose for this, and it really shows how pernicious surveillance can be, because the goal that the DEA has laid out, as the American Civil Liberties Union was able to figure out, is that they want to seize property. And that is the goal for having this network of local law enforcement, networking between state, federal, and local levels of law enforcement, that they want to use these license plate readers to make it easier to seize property.
So a lot of it is about just seizing property. Explain what the license plate reader is. Give me that system of license plate reading.
Well, it's a camera, and this camera system, as I presume, they set up these stations along these roads, and when people come by, they can detect. And it all goes into a database. And also, one of the things from targeting these people is that they can, once they have their information and everything, that's one thing. But also with these agents on the side of the road, as they're targeting these people, they're engaged in profiling. That's the other thing that's remarkable, because we have the ACLU story, but I also linked it back to the Washington Post's great series on asset forfeiture that was done last year, which was really good investigative journalism on their part into Justice Department records, and seeing how they actually profile drivers looking for behaviors that they say are quote unquote similar to drug dealers.
What would be kind of a profile, Kevin? First of all, they're doing this because, again, they can take property without there ever being an arrest. I think that's something people miss. They don't understand, how do you take somebody's car, how do you take their motorhome, how do you take their boat without ever making an arrest. So we start there, and so then the next point is, what are the things that they say might be significant in determining that we're going to profile somebody?
Yeah, so I think it's actually normal behavior. That's the thing, is that so many of us could engage in these behaviors and we wouldn't know that we were acting like drug dealers. It's like the officer comes up to you and you're more nervous than he thinks is usual. Or you're less nervous. Maybe you're so cool-tempered that he thinks it's really odd that you're handling him so well. Or this person's dressed in attire that they identify with the attire of a drug dealer. Like maybe you're wearing jewelry or something and it looks unusual. These behaviors that are very similar, that are just really normal behaviors that somehow are chalked up to drug dealer behavior.
Well, in your article, you did it was dark window tinting, air fresheners, trash in the vehicle. Let's see, long trips without a lot of baggage, profusion of energy drinks, talkative or quiet drivers, as you just pointed out, designer apparel that the driver might be using, and multiple cell phones. So this is a list. You didn't make the list up. This is a list that they use when they're trying to say, hey, maybe we can profile this driver and then maybe we can take their car. Isn't that kind of how the system works?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the significant thing that you really called attention to in this part here is that there is no arrest happening. There is really no suspicion of a crime. They just assume that it's connected or presume that it's connected to drug activity, and then they're able to seize it. And now it becomes your problem. If you want to get your property back, it's up to you to prove that you were not guilty, which can be quite a task for someone.
In other words, the burden shifts, which is unheard of. The burden then, it shifts to the claimant saying, hey, you've taken my car. I'd like to get it back. And now they have to prove that A, they're not a drug dealer, and B, none of the things in line here would have had any significance. Things like tinted windows or air fresheners or what they were wearing that day has any impact on the taking of the car. So it is kind of a ridiculous standard. Let me ask you this, Kevin. You in your article, by the way, very well done. Just a very good article. Everybody will read this. You've got the discussion about dirt box devices that are used in airplanes, and they mimic cell phone towers. Tell us how, I mean, this is crazy. Airplanes flying over us with these things called dirt boxes. Explain what that is.
Yeah, I mean these devices basically they take like Cessna aircraft. They have these devices, as you say, dirt box inside of them. They're used mostly around airports, but the U.S. Marshals Service covers, when you think of like the range that they cover nearby airports, it covers such a vast part of the United States that almost all of the civilian population could be swept up in this dragnet surveillance that they're basically doing, which they say is just around airports. So I put that in there because the license plate tracking network is another dragnet, and then we have this Cessna aircraft dragnet.
Yeah, I see.
And it's interesting to see the interrelationships with all of these dragnets.
Yeah, one thing that's in about 30 seconds, what's your take on this? A lot of this is dependent on how qualified the officer is in determining what suspicious activity. With all the latest news on officers, it's pretty scary to think that actually might be the case.
Well, I think that's where you get into the issue of racial profiling, where you see that disproportionately you've got minorities that are being targeted. And they're the ones that I think that these agents are going to look at and say, well, you're not talking to me that much. There must be something about you that makes you a drug dealer, so I'm going to take your car.
Yeah, and hope you don't have too many energy drinks inside your car, or hopefully you're not dressed in rap apparel. I mean, it's kind of what it's come to. Listen, Kevin, great article. Thank you for joining me, okay?